Hello painters, it's Lara. Thanks for joining me today to paint our Black Sheep painting. I enjoy this one because you can use different colors if you want to, and you can also, make, if you wanted to put a stack of maybe 4 sheep or something like that, or maybe it can be all birds, whatever you want. But I'm gonna show you how to make it look very similar to the one that I have right here. But as always, please feel free to personalize it any way you see fit. So I've got my normal brushes that I always have. So I've got my 1/2 inch paintbrush, otherwise known as a 14 flat, a 6 round, which is kind of a medium size that's kind of pointed, and then a little baby brush for details. So always starting with the larger paintbrush, I shouldn't say always, but we're gonna paint the background in first, and it's easier to paint the background using a larger paintbrush. Our background is clearly going to be the yellow and also the sky. So I'm gonna actually start with the yellow because I feel like that's gonna be a lot brighter once I rinse my paintbrush. It's just gonna keep me from having to clean out my brushes and clean out the water quite as much. So I am gonna add some water to my paint. The acrylic paint that we use is very, very thick. And if we don't add any water to it, it can end up not spreading very well, and you're not gonna like the way it just spreads across the canvas. It's gonna seem very gluey. So I want the paint to have more of a melted ice cream texture to it. So once I stir that up, I use my large paintbrush for that. And then I'm gonna go ahead and switch just very briefly to the medium paintbrush because I want to get a finer line. What I'm gonna do is paint a line that goes across here for the horizon line, or basically the top of the hill. So starting with I'm gonna use this medium paintbrush here. I've got just a little small amount of paint on it. I'm gonna start up, maybe up just a couple of inches, and then I'll go down and then come back up again. So starting over here, you can start on the right side if you'd like to, if you prefer. That is really your own artistic decision. This can be as hilly or as not hilly as you want it to. I am going to bring this over to the sides, as always, because I want to make sure that it gets wrapped around so it looks more complete, it looks more finished. You don't have to buy a frame in order to display it if you do that. So then you can just switch right back to your larger paintbrush and fill that in. Now at any time, if you want to pause the video, perhaps you're using a larger canvas and it's gonna take you a little bit more time to fill something in, or if you wanna rewind and see something else that happened before, you can definitely do that anytime you want to, painting in the sides. I am also gonna go ahead now, since I'm working on the bottom, I'm gonna go ahead and paint the bottom end. There's no reason I can just knock that out of the way here. And that way, again, this wraps around all 4 sides. Like so. Okay, so now that I have that done, I can go ahead and paint in the sky without having to worry about bringing blue colors into the ground. So another thing I'm gonna show you, you can use a blue and white mixture for your sky, or you can even make it a little bit more turquoise using the same colors that you have here on your palette. So I'm gonna use my large paintbrush right now, and I'm gonna mix a blue, but then I'm gonna show you how to make it a little more turquoise if you want to. We definitely need to add some white in here, so I'm gonna use this brush, I'm gonna pick up some of my white and pull it off to the side. I'm actually gonna scoop up maybe twice that much. It's maybe about half of my white. Then I'm gonna go ahead and use the blue to make it a light blue. I'm gonna pick up a small amount of blue. I've got maybe like a pea-sized drop there, and I'm gonna mix it into the white color. I always mix the dark color into the light color, not the other way around, and that way I can make it darker if I want to. It's a lot easier than trying to go backwards and make a color lighter again. So because I have yellow in my brush right now, I didn't really rinse it off completely. It actually is giving me a tiny, tiny bit of a green tint, which is sort of what I wanted. I'm gonna go through and make this quite a bit darker, and I might add a little bit more yellow too, just to make it more turquoise. But because I started with a very small amount of blue, I can now confidently add more of it if I wanna make it darker. And you can just keep adding small amounts of blue to your white until you get the shade of sky that you want. So you don't even need to mix it up completely. In this original one, we definitely have like some streaking within the sky, which kind of looks like clouds, which is fine. So I've got a nice color here that I can use for my background. If I want it to be a little bit more on the turquoise side, I can now scoop up a little bit of yellow, because yellow and blue make green. And if I mix that into it, that's going to make it, it's just gonna have more of a greenish tint to it instead of a blue. Actually, that looks really, really green. So perhaps I added a little bit too much yellow, which means I'm just gonna balance it right back out again and add more blue to it. So now it's still a nice blue sky. It just has more of a turquoise shade to it. That looks nice, I like that color. Still a little bit green. You can always adjust however you see fit. I'm gonna leave it kind of streaky like that, but I do need to add some water to it. So don't worry that your water is yellow. That's just going to, it's just gonna make your paint thinner. It's not really gonna change the color. So once I have that mixed in, I'm gonna switch once again, just very briefly, back to the medium paintbrush. And I'm gonna grab my turquoise color, and I'm gonna go right across the same area, just following that line that I have for the horizon. Try to keep your paintbrush on the canvas as long as possible, rather than making short, choppy brush strokes like little lines like this. You're just gonna get a smoother line that you're probably gonna end up liking better if you use those if you use longer brush strokes and not the short ones. So then switching back to my larger paintbrush, I can now go through and fill it in. I'm gonna keep using brush strokes that go side to side rather than using any brush strokes that go up and down. If you end up with some streaks in here, which I'll show you even how to add a few more if you like the way that looks, it's gonna look a lot more natural having those go side to side, because they will look a lot more like clouds, because you're not gonna see vertical clouds on a horizon. They're gonna look a lot more horizontal. So just kind of painting this through. Now because this is still wet, this is actually a good time to streak other colors in. So if I wanted to add some white in there, I can take this brush, just pick up some white, and I can go back and forth to streak that in. And because I'm using just those back and forth brush strokes, that's gonna make it look like clouds. If you want it to be more blue, you can add a tiny bit of blue to your brush, streak that across, and that looks really pretty. And now we don't have just this plain sky. We can have whatever shade we want. It's gonna add a little bit more interest to it if we add in some white and whatever other colors you want. So I'm just gonna go ahead and fill the rest of this in. You can do the same. Using long brush strokes, not short choppy ones. You'll notice I keep dipping my paintbrush into my water. I just felt like I did not add enough water to my original turquoise shade, and therefore it was not spreading very well. And when I find that happening, I just go ahead and add more water to it. And I'm getting the sides. I am also getting the top. I want to make sure this wraps around all 4 sides. I know I keep mentioning that, but I often forget to do that. Then I have to go back and do it later. I'm gonna go ahead and streak in a little bit more blue into this. And again, this is so much easier to do while that your paint is still wet. If you were to like walk away from your painting and let this dry, you really wouldn't be able to streak those colors in nearly as well. So do that now if you want to add in those different shades of blue across your sky. So that looks pretty nice right there. All right, now I do want to go ahead and wait for this to dry. So I can either let it air dry or I can use a hair dryer. Hair dryer makes a big difference in how fast that dries. But I'm gonna let it dry. I'm gonna let you let yours dry. And when I come back, we are going to add in our animals, our fence, and some details.